Welcome to the Straight Up Startup. We are here at the Doha Forum where the theme is building shared futures. Nonetheless, we cannot achieve shared futures without a solid economic infrastructure. Today, I have the honor of hosting my guest, who is a tech guru and has held many positions in prestigious tech firms, most notably Director of AI Vision Solutions Ecosystem at Intel and Head of Global Developer Relations and Emerging Areas at NVIDIA. She was also listed on Time Magazine's The 100 Most Influential People in AI. And now she's the founder of her own startup, Amini, which focuses on building data infrastructure by using satellite imaging and AI to collect environmental data to understand what's happening at the ground level down to the square meter. And my guest is Kate Kallot. Kate, welcome to the Straight Up Startup.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And as the booth we're in here is Viewpoint.
Yeah.
This is an interesting and different viewpoint from what we've been hearing today about policy and all of that. We want to focus more with you on economic infrastructure and data and AI. So tell us more about your career journey in tech and the founding story of Amini, which is very interesting.
Sure. I actually didn't study computer science. I got into tech from what I called by accident.
Yeah.
I was studying in Japan, and one of my professors used to work for Sony, and he taught us about how can tech influence behaviors. And in my head, I said to myself, this is what I want to do. So I came back to France, did an internship at Intel, and then off we go, my career in tech was launched. I got into AI specifically because now AI is everywhere, right? I got into AI specifically in 2015. And at that time, it was kind of like the first wave of the AI boom. And a lot of big companies were going onto this race for AI hardware and AI software. So that's kind of where I got into AI. And at that time, I was a product manager for the first AI development kit in a USB form factor called Movidius. Some people will remember this at Intel. Some people won't. It's okay if you don't. But the product went on to being a huge success, and that really kickstarted my career in the field. The reason why I was so attracted by AI was because very early, since I was building a developer kit, which basically empowers other developers to build their own application based on that hardware and software, it was I could see that people were putting their own challenges in building solutions. So for me, that triggered something that made me say to myself, this is where you need to push, and this is where your play is. Democratizing access to technology to people, but also allowing people to build their own solutions so they can solve challenges that are around them. And that has been a theme that has been pervasive throughout my career. So after Intel, I went to ARM, and then from ARM to NVIDIA. And fast forward last year at COP, I get invited to COP. And I've always wanted to do something for Africa because although I was born and raised in France, my family is from Central African Republic, forgotten country in the middle of Africa. And I grew up going back to Africa every summer, going to Senegal, going to Central Africa. But I could see how the continent was on one side slightly developing, on the other side lacking basic infrastructure. So for me, it was important that at some point in my career, I use everything that I've learned to go and build the continent or support building the continent. So when I was invited to speak at COP last year, I spoke about the intersection of natural capital, because Africa has a lot of natural capital, a lot of natural resources, right? When you think about own land resources, you think about our forest. The Congo Basin forest is the second largest biodiverse ecosystem in the world after the Amazonian in Latin America. So it has a big wealth of natural capital, but also a big wealth of human capital. 1.4 billion people going into 2 billion very soon. Amazing use, extremely smart, but is lacking the basic infrastructure. So I presented about the intersection of both, and I realized there was still a big problem to be solved in Africa, which was building an environmental data infrastructure for the continent. And that's why when I came back from COP last year, same weekend I incorporated the company and I decided to build Amini.
This is very interesting, and so now you've basically explained the rationale behind the move from big cities to Nairobi.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you more specifically, since you are part of the people and part of the entrepreneurs who are building that ecosystem, what is the potential that you see in the tech ecosystem there?
Yeah.
In Kenya specifically, in Nairobi, and Africa in general?
What you need to know is that a lot of the tech innovation, and even specifically in AI, in Africa is driven differently than the rest of the world. So in the US, tech innovation is driven by big tech. Big tech and the entire startup ecosystem in the Silicon Valley and beyond. In Europe, it's an innovation that's driven by regulations. So data regulations, privacy regulations, you think about things such as GDPR. In Asia, China specifically, the government has invested and encouraged the creation of a local tech ecosystem and has helped startup really sprout. But when you think about Africa, it's actually a grassroots innovation. It's driven from the youth, it's driven from developers, it's driven from startups. So it's a bottom-up innovation, right? And they're learning through non-traditional pathway institutions. What we call non-traditional pathway institutions is they're not going to university to learn about computer science for most of the part. They're actually learning through boot camps, hackathons. They congregate on weekend and just start hacking things, break things, build things. And that's how they learn. And that's how the innovation in this part of the world is being driven. So when I moved there, I knew I could find the talent that I needed for the company. And Kenya made sense because Kenya has also been at the forefront of AI for quite a while. You will find hiding in Kenya the founder of Data Science Africa, which is one of the largest data science group across the continent. And you will find also that Kenya has one of the top 3 largest tiny machine learning ecosystem across the world. Tiny machine learning that was born in like 2019. I was at the inception of that movement, but now Kenya is one of the biggest community for tiny ML worldwide, beyond US, beyond Europe. So Kenya has this very interesting intersection of good talent, but also extremely good ecosystem when it comes to VC and startups. And for me, it made sense to not only settle there, but also support that youth that has been extremely dynamic over the past couple of years to help them also build and be part of that ecosystem that we're trying to build as a company.
Absolutely, and it's very interesting that what you're telling me, the approach of self-learning and bottom-up development, which is very interesting, especially that Kenya specifically has so much youth as part of the population, and which brings me to that part, which is youth unemployment rate is as high as 35%, which is a record similar to developing nations in the Middle East. And in your opinion, how does the tech ecosystem can empower youth in such adversities, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship and job creation? So how can they lead more startups and make use of it and employ others, create that culture? How does that play a role in supporting youth?
So, I see tech as an enabler, not tech as an end, but tech as a mean to an end. And it's a tool that in the right hands can go about creating jobs, but also empowering communities and enable this youth to actually innovate for their communities and their country. One of the things you need to know in my company, probably 10 of our employees are below or at the age of 25. Some of them have already created 2 startups.
Wow.
Like brilliant engineers, machine learning developers, and data scientists. The reason why the startups were not successful is because I feel like tech today, and specifically AI, has still a huge bias towards the global north and towards innovation coming from US or Europe, right? A lot of the times we see tech innovation or AI innovation as being just open AI or a new model that comes from a lab in the Silicon Valley. But actually, if we just remove our biases as an ecosystem and we look and we start thinking about AI innovation or tech innovation, not in the way of a new compute infrastructure or a new model that's being created, but in the way where the technology that exists is applied to solve real world challenges. Challenges for people, challenges for the environment, challenges for communities. this is real innovation. And if we start seeing the world like this, we have to also start bringing the investments, because right now, most of the capital that goes into tech also sits in the US and in Europe, right? Doesn't sit in the developing nations. Yet, we also need capital to be able to build our startups and scale. So we have to remove our biases, but also make sure that we support the capital flowing into this use, so their technology, their innovations can actually sprout, because they're solving the real challenges of today.
Absolutely. And I cannot agree more with you, Kate. And I want to hop to a different question here. And to kind of expand on your answer. Since we're here, the forum theme is building shared futures.
Yes.
Which is also kind of democratizing finance and financing other tech ecosystem around the world. So your move to Kenya was, a move to a developing nation that's ripe for innovation. And do you think there are potential opportunities to tapping into other development nations that have that desire of development and growth, especially when it comes to exporting technology and there are a lot of, as you said, innovation comes from a need to solve issues. This is where AI comes into place. It's not a company, it's not a thesis, it's not one model. It's just solving problems using that model and having it around. So can exporting technology to other developing nations is a way to support scaling those startups? And if so, how can we do it? You're here at the Doha Forum in the Middle East, and we probably need to build some bridges. So how do you think we can best do that?
So I can give you a simple example, which is my company today. So we're building an environmental data infrastructure for Africa, but actually we realized that what we're building for are problems that are pervasive across developing nations. Why environmental data infrastructure? Because 60% of our population in Africa are smallholder farmers. Agriculture is the pullman of our economies, right? We are economies that still rely a lot on agriculture. Next to that, most of the coffee people drink, most of the chocolate people eat comes from Africa. The raw commodities come from Africa. So environmental data is the single most important type of data when it comes to the African continent. But what we realized actually is that this problem is pervasive to other nations when we started building. We've been engaging with Barbados. Barbados, which is a small development island state, like it's been called in the Caribbean, right? But actually, did you know that Barbados Barbados oceans are more than 400 times the size of its length? And its oceans are extremely rich in natural capital. Then you go to Brazil. Did you know that Brazil and Africa used to be one single continent?
No.
Called Atlantica. So the climate and the topographies of Brazil and Nigeria, for example, are extremely similar.
Wow.
So Brazil also has a lot of cocoa and a lot of coffee. Same to Colombia. And then you go to Southeast Asia, where it's also very similar. So as countries in the global south, we have this shared, I call it the natural capital paradox, shared natural capital paradox, where we're extremely rich on natural resources, natural capital. We have the human capital. We just need the technological innovation to help us build and advance. So when we started building and started sprouting as a company, we started receiving requests from other countries saying, can you actually do that in my country? Or our customers would be, are you covering Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire in terms of cocoa? Can you also do Brazil? Because I have supply chain across the entire tropical belt. So we quickly realized that actually there's a lot to do. And those challenges that were defining us as Global South are actually, I would flip it around and say, are actually opportunities that now can unite us in terms of flipping the coin of what we think is technological innovation, but also working together to develop ourselves. And then it goes one step further. We need to also collaborate in terms of research and innovation. Brilliant students and universities. I was sitting yesterday at dinner with someone who works at the Ministry of Education here in Qatar. And she was telling me that there are a lot of Senegalese students that come here from Senegal and learn Arabic and study at some of the top universities in Qatar. I was so surprised. I had no idea. But imagine those nodes between Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Brazil, Barbados, or the Caribbean, the Middle East, GCC, working together on technological research and innovation for the global South to really build the infrastructure of tomorrow for our regions.
Exactly, and collectively.
And collectively.
Exactly.
Exactly.
This is why it's an important viewpoint, because technology is a unified language.
Yes.
We might not speak the same language, but when it comes to problems and solutions, we do.
We do.
Exactly. So this is very interesting, Kate, and I want to hone in more on your startup, Amini.
Yes.
It has a very big mission, and the technology behind it is even at a larger scale.
It is.
And I want to learn more about the journey of creating the software and the hardware product.
Yes.
And the challenges you have faced while creating them. I'm sure there's plenty, and they're very different. And I can see everyone in different continents are facing the same challenges.
Yes.
So, tell us more.
So, like I mentioned, we're building an environmental data infrastructure for Africa and the global South. What does that mean? We're pulling from geospatial data, so data from satellites, and we're integrating other sources of data to generate high quality data sets and machine learning analytics. So in terms of use cases, you would think about generating data at the farm level, where you look at crop health, you look at soil health, water, floods, drought, pest infestation. And then using this data, you give that to an insurance who will create new categories of crop insurance product for farmers. You give that to a bank who will now create the necessary financial infrastructure for farmers and be able to provide them loans or microfinance against assets. You give that to a government aggregated at a country level. The government can now better food security and strengthen food resilience. And then you give that to a large private sector company who has a supply chain into Africa or beyond, who can now use that to mitigate the risk alongside their supply chain. But then you have to, basically data is being used to make decisions every day. So you have to find a way to provide that data and that information back to the hands of the farmers and the people who need it the most in a free and digestible way. Because for me, for technology to be useful, it has to be invisible and it has to be accessible. So farmers need to have access to that technology. So we're also doing this in a free way. But that allows us to have data and transparency alongside the entire value chain. Now, we've been using data from NASA, from the European Space Agencies. And very quickly when we started building, we realized that actually there is no satellite constellation, even private, that has been built with our context in mind, with Africa or the global South in mind. So when we faced this cornerstone of decision where it was, okay, so what do we do now? Because we need to increase the quality, the revisit, the resolution of the satellite imagery that's flowing into our platform. We had two choices. Either we go and strike some partnerships, and it's going to take us a long time and convince a lot of American companies who will have large constellations of satellites and make gazillions of money on this technology. Or we go about launching our own constellation of nanosatellites. Guess which one we picked?
The second, of course.
Of course.
Knowing you, of course, you picked the second one.
Of course. We picked the second one.
Yes.
So in our phase 2, we're deploying our constellation of nanosatellite, and it's going to be the first constellation coming from a private sector company in Africa.
Wow.
And we aim to be able to provide almost constant monitoring on our region and the rest of the tropical belt, because we'll be able to cover the rest of the tropical belt. But also very interestingly enough, what I realized when I started looking into satellite technology is that the bottlenecks that created edge AI or edge machine learning back in the days when the entire movement was spurred are actually the same in space. So when the movement of edge machine learning came about, before, people thought that to be able to do AI, you had to have sensors where you collect data. Then you had to have gateways that will process a little bit of that data. Then you had to have clouds or data centers to process more and more data. And build and run more analytics. But you had issues around bandwidth, latency, and cost of cloud computing. Actually, the problems that we see in the ground are the same in space.
Wow.
So one of the, and especially when you're looking at doing analytics on an area that's as big as Africa. I mean, in Africa, you can fit US, India, China, Europe, all combined, right? It's an extremely big continent, though it doesn't look like on the map.
Yeah, indeed.
It's extremely big, extremely vast.
And also populated.
And also very populated.
Yes.
And with a lot of the current constellation, when you get out of densely populated area, Africa becomes completely dark because they were not built for that context,
exactly.
right?
And different topographies and natures and
exactly different topographies, different climates from one place to the other in the same city.
Exactly.
So how do you adapt to that? And you have large population of smallholder farmers, 600 million of them. When you need to run analytics on a lot of them sparse across the entire continent.
Absolutely.
What am I going to go and pay hundreds of billions of dollars to be able to do that to a company in the US? It makes no sense. So we decided to actually launch our own constellation. So we will do edge processing in orbit. We're using actually NVIDIA GPUs because that's my background to be able to do that and run analytics on the fly and only get the results. That's for me building technology that's adapted to our context and understand and takes into account the uniqueness of our countries.
This is very interesting, Kate, because you're starting a whole notion of collecting data on a very large scale, on a continent level.
Yeah.
And not just any continent.
Many continents.
Not just any continent. How was... I don't want to say challenges, but how was tackling the lack of information, the infrastructure, the knowledge, and developing the people? I know you've been working in, and as we mentioned, in the biggest tech firms.
Yeah.
But you need a supportive ecosystem for you to launch that.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
I feel actually privileged because I've worked in that ecosystem, because I've worked for some of these, for the biggest tech companies in the world, they're still supporting me today. So, and for me, when we started building the company, I said to myself, I need to solve one of the toughest problems that I can for Africa and the rest of the global South, because I know that if I don't do it, maybe no one will be able to do it. You know? So I felt that sense of mission based on everything that I had learned and everything that I had done before, and the power of ecosystem. I've built ecosystem for Intel, I've built ecosystem for ARM, I've built ecosystem for NVIDIA. That's what I do. I build ecosystem and I solve big problems, complex, very large problems, right? So I said to myself, I cannot just go and build a machine learning company and build an app or a small solution, because if there is no data, no one is going to actually go about building the infrastructure. Someone has to do it. And even my team said, we need to solve the hardest problem that we find so that others then will be able to build on top of what we create, on top of the ecosystem we create, right? So we actually partner with NVIDIA, with HP, with the United AI Alliance. They shipped us GPUs that you can't find on the continent. We're using that for advanced climate risk modeling. Model our data, forecast, build large language models from the continent, which is absolutely amazing.
Wow.
So we're able to bring that entire ecosystem that I had with me when I was still working in the US in Africa. And that's the beauty of it. But I'm hoping that what we're building is going to lay the foundation for a lot. Think about building a giant app store, basically, where then you have developers from every part of the world. We'll have developers in Barbados who will be solely focused on this ocean problem and ocean data that can create a blueprint for the rest of the Caribbean. You will have developers in Brazil that will specifically look at minerals, specifically look at cocoa, and can work in conjunctions with developers in Cote d'Ivoire or Ghana who have the same commodities. So think about creating that entire ecosystem coming from our regions, using our platform, because now you have an abundance of data. And for me, I want to open source that data to our developers, to our people, so they can build, and then build solutions that are adapted and customized and localized for their countries.
This is extremely interesting, Kate, and I want to follow up on that because we're seeing something different. AI has been taking a large space in our world today, with a lens of fear of job replacement instead of building on that technology. And I want to ask you, as one of the 100 most influential people in AI according to Times Magazine. Yes. I'm gonna kind of reverse that fear and ask you, how can youth best equip themselves to maximize this technology? And for the audience, for the audience that are listening, because they're mostly youth, how can they pragmatically do it? Where they learn it? How can they learn it? Where do they start? And how they can embed day-to-day technology into their day-to-day technology learning into their lives, so they can maximize it? I know it's a big question, but it's a big question. But how do you see that materializing?
Yeah.
Because as you said, you're building that infrastructure. Now you need the talent to build it instead of instilling fear of job replacement.
Yes.
So how can we be more proactive instead of reactive?
I mean, you touch on it. Education is going to be big. Again, AI is just a tool, right?
Yes.
But usually we are scared of something we don't understand.
Yes.
But if you take the time to go and educate yourself about AI, then you will understand that it's a tool that in your hands can be extremely powerful and useful. One of the things I want to tell them, I didn't know anything about AI prior to 2014, right? When I got into the field. I had to learn like in a completely speedy way because I was launching an AI product. So that was my way into AI. I didn't know anything about technology before I get to Japan, right? But then I decided that this is what I'm fascinated about, and this is what I'm passionate about, and this is what I want to really understand. So if you think this is your passion, if there is something, a problem you want to solve and you think that AI can help, it's never too late to start learning, right? Never too late to start learning. It's been almost 10 years now in my career. And I think that what has driven me is that curiosity, but also that passion for solving problems using technology. So if you have that in you, start now. Now, internet has democratized information for everybody. You can actually get starting courses for AI online. You can find courses from Stanford University, MIT, all on YouTube. You can go on Coursera and start taking courses to start understanding how to build machine learning or deep learning models. So we all now have access to information, free information that we can use, and most of us are equipped with a mobile phone.
Yeah.
So it's never too late. That's the only tool that you need.
That's amazing to hear, because it's using this is what I think about. It's like it used to be going to searching for information in a library. Now you Google it, and now Googling something is so normalized that people are like baffled if you don't use Google.
Yeah.
So this is very interesting. And okay, I want to ask you more on something very crucial that we're lacking in the global South.
Yes.
Which is venture funding.
Yes.
It's very important to tap into that. There's a huge shortage, and not just on a market level. There are, in some areas in technology, some industries are completely forgotten. It's very trend based. So we can fund whatever it's trending. But what are the other things that can be trending, can be more scaled with funding?
Yeah.
Starting your own journey, and with such magnitude, tell us more. What do we need to do more in order to attract more venture funding?
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier on removing our biases when it comes to venture funding, right? My personal journey when I started building the company, I had to bootstrap at the beginning, but when I started going to VCs, they were like, why are you doing this from Africa? So first I started with like mostly VCs based in Africa. And a lot of them were like, oh, we don't understand deep tech. We don't understand AI, even less satellites. Are you crazy? What is going on here? So we got a lot of doors shut down to us.
Yeah.
And then I decided to go to the investors who would understand the problem I'm trying to solve for their customers, who actually are sitting in the global north, right? So it was mostly climate tech investors. And then it clicked for them. They said, we don't understand Africa, but we know that climate change is real, and a lot of the customers you're targeting who are based here in Europe and the US will need access to your technology. So this is why we're investing. The second round went much faster and was much easier because we had traction, we were revenue generating, we had already built our platform, like the first version of our platform. A lot of demand, a lot of energy for our technology. So we actually raised a round in less than 3 weeks. But I do believe that I still have a sort of mandate to pay it forward, and pay it forward to other startups and other developers in our regions who are thinking of getting into that space, because there's still a need for education. There's a need to educate the foreign capital on the challenges that our regions are facing and why those technologies that they might not consider innovative because they already exist somewhere else in their regions are actually useful here. And on the other side, there is an education that needs to happen to our investors in our regions and educating them around technologies that they don't know and they've not seen before. In Africa, for a very long time, most investors were investing in fintech because most of the unicorns that have been built on the continent are fintech unicorn. But now you come with deep tech, and they're like, well, we don't understand that. Unless you're doing fintech, we won't invest. But actually, deep tech has the tremendous opportunities to solve a lot of the challenges that our continent is facing today. So they need to start learning about this.
Absolutely.
So when I think about myself and the position that Amini has, because we're given such a platform, I'm here in Doha Forum today. I was at COP for 2 weeks. I was named in Time 100 most influential people in AI. I feel like I'm carrying a torch to, on one side, shed the lights on the problems that we're facing on the global south that can be solved through technology, but on the other side, educate all communities on deep technologies.
Exactly. And it starts with education, especially with someone with your background. And it seemed difficult or challenging. This is enormous. We have so much education to spread out and learning to do. And I'm so impressed that Amini is now also a school for other entrepreneurs, which is exactly what we need. We need scale-ups and startups that can scale, educate, and move forward. And especially on like, I want to ask you about something that's very important.
Yeah.
What would you say what would you tell someone or an entrepreneur who trying to create a product at your scale? Because everyone would say you're crazy if you're not. Exactly, and we're seeing here, especially in the Middle East, is exporting technologies and translating them into the language that we're in. Especially here it's Arabic, so just taking foreign innovation and translating it to the Arab world, which is fine. This is one way you can take it, but disruption.
Yes.
And people who are trying to disrupt, what would you tell them in terms of the journey and believing in themselves? It's so psychological and technical. I just want to hear from you.
There's one thing I learned at NVIDIA from Jensen. He always says that there was no levels. Like, there's no boss at NVIDIA. The mission is the boss, right? And that's something I carried into my company. It's not about me. It's about the problem I'm trying to solve, but also the mission I'm carrying as a person, but also as a person from a specific community, right? So I want to say, don't be scared, persevere. It's going to be hard. I'm not lying. I'm not going to lie, right? You're going to cry. It's going to be painful. It's going to be hard. Some people are going to say you're crazy. Some people will shut the door to you. But always think about the mission.
Yes.
Your mission, your personal mission. And every time it gets hard, I think about Jensen and I'm like, yes.
Amen.
I remember my mission. It's not about me. It's about my mission. It's about my mission to the youth.
Indeed.
It's about my mission to our countries, to our communities. And if you don't do it, no one will do it for you.
Exactly.
So don't give up.
So at the end, it's our signature wrap up.
Yes.
What's your straight up words of wisdom to all, to whomever you want to send the message to probably also women in tech?
Yes.
Entrepreneurs, startups, people in emerging nations and developing markets. Pick one or pick all of them. What would you tell them? What's your straight up words of wisdom?
To women, women of color, women from emerging markets. It is hard because a lot of people will say, I do not understand why you're doing this. It's a field that's extremely lonely. So when I come here and I interact with women from Qatar, women from Saudi, I was in the UAE before, I know that the journey I've been through, they're also going through. So I think that to some extent, we have to create a community and don't be scared to share our experiences. Because in most of the cases, what I've realized is that what I'm facing, somebody else has faced before. Or what somebody is facing, I have faced before. And there are some lessons that I've been able to extract from it that I would be very happy to share with you. So when you see other women, always try to connect and empower them, because we're all facing those same challenges in most part of our countries. To entrepreneurs, I feel you. I feel you, especially to solo entrepreneurs. I feel you.
Yeah, which is
solo founders.
I know you're a solo entrepreneur, and wow,
the most painful job in the world.
I don't know what to say.
But the most rewarding job in the world, because it's your mission.
Yes.
It's your mission, it's your vision, it's the impact you want to have. It's the impact you want to have on people, and that's so beautiful. When I see young people coming to me and saying, oh my God, your company is so inspiring. Today you've inspired me to create this. Oh, I would love to work for your company. Before I thought I had to leave Africa and go work for big tech in the US, but now I want to work for your company. I remember that it's not for me, it's for my mission, and it's for my mission to these people.
That's amazing. And the mission you're carrying on so many levels, now that we have deep dived into the interview, on so many levels, it's huge.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, financially, psychologically, everything. And kudos to you. And this is important to highlight the importance of resilience and being resilient.
Oh my God,
it's easier said than done. I'm very sure of it.
That's how my team describes me, the resilient one.
Exactly.
Not giving up.
That's what's standing. This is fascinating, and I hope we can export more of that mindset into the region, and I'm sure there is a lot, and it's we're all going through that journey together. So this is what brings us together, and this is what makes us grow together.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that we met here and we had this conversation. Although we had a couple of technical difficulties, but it was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
And to many more of your success and disruptions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
more
so
disruption.
much, Kate. More disruptions. Thank you so much, Kate,
for
being at the Straight Up Startup, and looking forward to more conversations.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you for having me.
جمهورنا العزيز، ما تنسوا تعملوا سبسكرايب للقناة وريت للحلقة، وتابعوا قناتنا على يوتيوب إذا حابين تحضروها للحلقة، ولقانا معاكم بالحلقة الجاي من The Straight Up Startup.